Wonderful. Once again, good morning. Welcome to all, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rebecca Bell Chavez. I'm President and CEO of the Inter-American Dialogue. For those of you who don't know the Dialogue, our mission is to engage our network of global leaders to foster democratic governance, shared prosperity, and social equity throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. On behalf of the Dialogue community and in pursuit of our mission, it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Irfaan Ali, the President of Guyana. We're also joined today by many friends and leaders of the Americas. Among them is the Honorable Brian Nichols, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs. At this point, I would be following protocol if I were to go into a long introduction of Brian. He has so many professional accomplishments, and his impact on the hemisphere has been incredibly positive over time, a long time dedication to the region. But the last time I introduced you at a Dialogue event, I think I went a little bit overboard, Brian. So I am simply going to say that Brian is a tremendous leader, an incredibly effective representative of the US government, and a friend to us all. I can say from firsthand experience, I've known Brian since 2008, that he represents the very best of the US Foreign Service, both in the region and globally. Welcome, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rebecca Bill Chavez, for that incredibly generous introduction. But we are here to welcome His Excellency President Mohammed Irfaan Ali and his august delegation. And I'll tell you that when Rebecca asked me to make this introduction, I said yes instantaneously, because this is an opportunity to hear from somebody who is a visionary leader in our region across a whole host of issues. And I had the incredible honor to be with Secretary Blinken in Georgetown on July 6th, where we were able to really dive deeply into a number of areas of cooperation. But the leadership that President Ali has shown at a pivotal moment in his nation, in our region, and globally is with few, if any, precedents. He's someone who is incredibly committed to the strengthening of democracy in Guyana, and he has worked incredibly hard to make that a reality. He's someone who I think you won every district in your in the last election, and by a significant margin. And you are somebody who has worked to ensure that the incredible benefits of the wealth that has been discovered in Guyana, which I'm sure all the people in this room are well aware of, are used transparently and effectively for the benefit of the people of Guyana, as well as to aid the region more broadly. His leadership in that regard is matched by his resounding commitment to address the existential challenge of climate change. It is exceptionally important for people to understand that the investments that Guyana is making in the hydrocarbons sector are exceeded by the efforts that they are making to preserve the rainforest of Guyana, to invest in renewable energy, and to ensure that partner nations in the region also receive those benefits, such that there will be a baseload capacity for the region. There'll be a transition away from heavy oil that's used to generate electricity, and you will have a lower carbon footprint for Guyana and its partners in the region in the wake of these investments than you will now or on a normal trajectory. I think that's incredibly important. The issue of food security is a crucial one for the Caribbean. Uh, Food security in the region is multifaceted as a challenge. It's one where not only do some not have access to a nutritious diet, but more broadly, many people do not have the opportunity to buy affordable food. The cost of food is too high. And President Ali has been seized with that challenge in ensuring a more equitable pricing for the people of the region. Across a whole host of international issues, he's also played a leadership role. Just before coming in here, we were discussing the situation in Haiti and our cooperative response to help the Haitian people at this crucial moment. He has a robust schedule here in Washington, meeting leaders from across the government, private sector, Congress, and I know that they're all very excited to talk to him because he has such a compelling vision that's so important for the United States and our region broadly. This is a man that I could talk about for days, singing his praises. I will not do that. I give you the President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Dr. Irfaan Ali.
Thank you very much, please. From that introduction, you will know that Brian is a dear friend of the CARICOM region, and he has done tremendously well in bringing awareness, bridging gap, and expanding the relationship and also solidifying the relationship of the US and CARICOM. And I want to thank Brian for the tremendous role he's playing and for all of us to applaud the role that he is playing, very significant role between the US and CARICOM relationships. So we can give him an applause for that role that he's playing. Really, I did not know what to speak to you about today because many of you are aware and we've been speaking so many times about the type of opportunity that exists in Guyana. But I think that there are some things that come up in every conversation that I want to address when you look at, because we see ourselves, as I said, as part of a whole. We are not an island unto ourselves. I said many times that the prosperity of Guyana must lead to the prosperity of the region. And the CELAC region is a very special region. And I say so because if I ask many friends their views, they would say, talk about different players, different partners within the CELAC region and speak about their contribution in the CELAC region itself. And then you would hear about China investment, India investment, the US investment, the role of China, the role of the US in the region itself. But if you look at some very interesting data, it really shifts your focus. If you look at FDI, foreign direct investment in the CELAC region by 3 countries, and I've selected these 3 countries because we are all aware that the largest middle class and the growth of the middle class in India and China will be so strong that every market must pay attention because they will be influencing every market. So I wanted to look at US, India, and China, and to look at their FDI in the CELAC region. So in 2020, the US investment was $95 billion. In 2022, it grew to $285 billion, an increase of 200%. India went from 64 billion US dollars to 49.5 billion US dollars, a decrease of 23%. And China went from 149 billion US dollars to 189 billion US dollars, an increase of 26.8%. So in those 2 years, the FDI investment from the US grew by 200%, and China grew by 26.5%. Now I say that to say this. That must tell a story about, one, the level of confidence from the US investor in the region now. Has to be linked to the strengthening of systems, the strengthening of the rule of law, democracy issues, and so on. So that is why these issues are so closely linked to the FDI. But what is it that the future requires? So that is the current FDI. And just for us to understand the scale of what is required, and not what is required to build fanciful infrastructure, but what is required to achieve the SDG goals by 2030. The IDB recently completed a report titled The Infrastructure Gap in Latin America and the Caribbean in order to achieve the SDG by 2030. And this is what they found. SDG 6, which is to ensure access to water and sanitation for all. There's a gap, a funding gap of 374 billion US dollars. We're 7 years away from 2030. In SDG 7, which is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable modern energy, which includes all forms of energy, there's a gap of US $577 billion. SDG number 9, which is to build resilient infrastructure, promote sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation, there's a funding gap of over $1 trillion. Achieving safer cities, resilient and sustainable cities, a funding gap of 224 million US dollars, and that is SDG number 11. So you have a funding gap to achieve SDG 6, 7, 9, and 11 in the region of more than $2.5 trillion in 7 years. Where is that resources going to come from? And to add to this, I'm not even going to raise the issue, very important issue, of the cost of digitization, and whether digitization would now be the new form of expanding inequality between countries in the region. Why do I say this? We are aware that when mechanization came upon us and modernization, countries that could not have find the capital resources to mechanize and modernize at the pace at which developed countries were mechanizing and modernizing became less competitive, less attractive for investment. And as a result, greater inequality stepped in. Now that you are now moving closer to transfer of technology and some form of mechanization, we have a situation where digitization is coming on stream, and many of the countries are not in a position to move at the pace at which the world is moving. Now, why do I raise this issue? I raise this issue to say that we in Guyana are of the view that we too do not have the luxury of the time to wait and to play the catch-up game. So we are setting ourselves an aim of building an economy 2030 and beyond that is ahead of time. That is how I'll title it. One that is resilient, sustainable, and one that is highly competitive. To do that, We understand that we have to apply the best of technology and the most modern architecture now in building out the economy and the country, and then work backwards to bring the population along. That requires heavy investment in education and healthcare, social infrastructure, physical infrastructure, and that is what we are focused on, bringing the population at the speed that the new Guyana and the new economy would require the population to be at. And those are important, that is the important platform through which I want to couch some of what I want to say. But for us to understand what we are doing in Guyana and to see the impact of what we're doing, I want to point to one particular sector. And this is a sector that we have Mount Sinai working with us. That is the modernization of the healthcare system. One of the things we want to achieve is the best possible healthcare for the people of our country and the people of the region. To do this, we have to invest in infrastructure, the doctors, the nurses, and that by itself is a major global problem. Where are the next generation of healthcare workers going to come from? The nurses, the technicians, and so on. Because what we're seeing in the Caribbean now, and this is something will be a crisis on our hands soon, is massive recruitment of nurses in the region. That is creating tremendous gaps and shortages. So we have been investing in this new healthcare system with new hospitals from both the public and private sector. We've removed corporate tax on all health services. And what have we seen? But let me give you an important piece of stat before I go there. If you look at health, in Latin America and the Caribbean, we invest approximately $327 per capita in 2020 on health. In Canada, which was once, I don't know if it is still regarded as the Mecca for healthcare, invested $4,536 per capita on health. Globally, the average investment in healthcare is $747 per capita. In Guyana, we are moving from a position just in 2 years from investing $342 per capita, which was already higher than the Latin American Caribbean average, to $544 per capita. Massive increase in the investment per capita for healthcare. In education, the average investment per capita in Latin America and the Caribbean is $430. Globally, it is $533 US. In 2021, we were at $389 per capita, below the average of Latin America and the Caribbean, which was $430. Today, our per capita investment in education is $605 US, far above the average. But more importantly, the average per capita investment in 2020 globally was $533 US. We are at $605 US per capita investment in education. And the same can be said for security and so on. Now, what has this investment resulted in? That is the big question. Because at the end of the day, results is what matters. Despite COVID, and COVID brought about a regression in life expectancy in many countries, or it made it static in most countries. We have seen improvement in life expectancy in Guyana. We have seen a movement of male now from female from 69 to 74. even after COVID. So the results of the investment of healthcare is starting to bear fruits. The reduction of child mortality. Child mortality is now at its lowest in the history of our country. It is now 13 per 1,000 birth versus 19 per 1,000 in just 2020. In 3 years, reduced it to 13. Maternal mortality is also at its lowest ever in the history of the country. From 96 per 10,000 delivery, from 170 mortality per 10,000 population in 2017 to 96 today. Tremendous improvement. So the results are there to show that the action that we're taking, and we are not only building the physical facility and putting in the equipment, but we are also modernizing the sector. We are now digitization is taking place in the healthcare sector, where we're developing a patient care information system, a patient management system. So these are the type of investment that would give us the capacity to have a highly effective, competitive, and functional human resource or people asset, and also country. Perfect match. Now, what are the most recent reports saying about Guyana? And I want to point to the IMF Article 4 report that came out just a day or two ago. And in summary, it says the Guyana economy continues to grow very rapidly, supported by the government's modernization plans, including the unparalleled oil sector expansion. Real GDP is expected now at 38% by the end of 2023. In the first half of this year, real GDP grew by 59.5%. But importantly, the non-oil economy grew by 12.3%. Now, the IMF report went on to say, and this is a staff report, commended the government of Guyana on the progress in strengthening the AML, that's the anti-money laundering, CFT, governance, anti-corruption framework, and support further advances in their effective implementation. So not only are we building out the physical infrastructure, we're expanding investment, we're diversifying the economy, but importantly, we're addressing very, very key issues. And here the IMF points to one such issue. The report commended the government of Guyana progress to strengthen management of the oil wealth and fiscal transparency. It lauded the authorities' effort on climate change. And we have repositioned the country now on 3 very important issues. And in a very humble way, what we are seeking to achieve in Guyana is to be among the leaders globally on climate security, energy security, and food security. We are planning the country in such a way that no conversation should occur globally on these 3 subjects without Guyana being at the table. So we are positioning ourselves, the investment, the infrastructure, building the competitiveness, and improving our capacity to position ourselves globally in these 3 areas: climate, energy, food. So those 3 pillars are very critical. Supporting those pillars is the issue of modernization and the technological advancement of the country. Now, how are we performing in the region? Our GDP per capita by 2032 should go to about $35,000 US per capita, moving from 6,900 in 2020 to 17,000 plus now per capita, an increase of almost 155%. That is a very significant increase when you look at our GDP per capita. Our net international reserves also grew by 36.7% between 2020 and 2023. Now, importantly, whilst all of this is taking place, the total stock of the government public debt as a share of GDP stands at 24.6%. Even with all that is taking place, our debt to GDP ratio stands at 24.6%, compared to the LAC region, where the debt ratio in 2022 averaged 117% of GDP. We are at 24.6, the lowest in the region. Our total debt service as a share of the current revenue is just 7.20%. 7.20%. Inflation, we have the first half of this year, we have seen tremendous improvement in inflation, keeping it at very low single digit. And that is because of some direct intervention in supporting and cushioning rising food prices and oil prices in the last 2 years. If you look at real estate mortgage as a share of private sector credit, it's 31%. Importantly, non-performing loan in the banking sector has reduced from 10.6% to 4.69%. So these are very important indicators to tell you where we are and what we are doing from a purely fiscal perspective. But let me say this also. We have also set ourselves some very strong internal policies. For example, we are not in this market, we are not prepared to borrow on variable rates. Now, many people will say you're crazy because in this existing market, everything is on variable rates. But we have made it a point that any borrowing must be on fixed rate and less than a very low percent, less than 4% in most cases. And we have been able to achieve this in this existing market. Whilst we see interest rate rising for home loans, in Guyana, we have seen a major reduction in the interest rate for housing. And that is because of a very robust, expansive housing program that the government is implementing. And that program is based on the transfer of wealth. Because what we do is that you have a mixed development where a low-income person would acquire a piece of land or a house at a very low cost. But the real value, the bankable value, because of what surrounds it, sometimes is 10, 20 times what they acquired at. So instantly, their net asset worth increases, and they're able to catalyze that and capitalize on that. And by capitalizing on it, they then can borrow on that asset and own, some of them own taxis and so on, that immediately take them to another level of earning and income. So these are, I want to spend a lot of time answering your questions, but I wanted to position Guyana in this context. The other important issue here is how are we going to, what the future economy, what the future of the country would look like. Not only are we going to be a major oil producer, but very soon we'll have our national gas strategy. And that itself will bring tremendous benefit to the country. We'll have a situation where we are going to cut the costs of energy by 50% before 2025. That, of course, will improve our competitiveness and bring more manufacturing and industrial development and opportunities in Guyana. We're investing heavily in technology, making health and education export earning potential for us with the type of investment that is taking place. We're going to position Guyana to be the leading market for ecotourism, We're going to invest heavily in that. We're building a lot of partnership around that. Not only ecotourism, but building sports tourism into that ecotourism. We are now modernizing our defense force, re-equipping the defense force, building a very robust, accountable police force driven a lot by technology, and that will help in accountability. So a lot of investment is going there too, because we have to ensure we have a secure environment, very, very secure environment. That is key for us. So the future for us really is one that will have a very diversified outlook, not built for oil and gas or built on oil and gas. We see oil as that important opportunity to give us the revenue that is necessary to build out all the other sectors of the economy so that they can become highly competitive. Integrating Guyana and our geographic location with the expansion of northern Brazil, because northern Brazil badly require a deepwater port and a road connection to make their produce and the cost of production less and their produce more competitive. And that is something that is important. On the climate side, as you know, we are leading on the forests. Our forests, you know, the size of England and Scotland combined. We have the lowest deforestation rate in the world, high quality carbon. We are one of the few countries that already have a end user agreement with Hess Corporation. So we are advancing the work on forests. We are now leading a coalition set up by the Commonwealth heads of government to look at the forested countries and to provide a framework that we will take to COP28. So these are some of the things that we are doing now in ensuring that we build a strong, robust economy, one in which that will bring prosperity to all the people of our country. And we're doing it under a banner called One Guyana. And the One Guyana concept is about equity. It is about social justice. It is about building prosperity at the community level, at the family level, and then taking that prosperity all the way up. It is about seeing our and playing our role in the development and prosperity of the region, the CARICOM region, the CELAC region. It is about ensuring that the rule of law, democracy, good governance are essential part of what frame our future and the foundation on which we rest. And it is really about cementing our place and making the investment now. The next 7 years are going to be the most crucial years. It's what we call the building block years, to ensure that the economy Guyana would have 2030 and beyond will be futuristic, ahead of time, resilient, sustainable, highly functional, and competitive. So thank you very much, and I am willing now and ready to take all your questions and also to listen to your ideas. Thank you very much.
There we go. Thank you so much, President Ali. Your remarks definitely highlighted the strategic importance of Guyana. I love the way you described it, part of a whole, which really merits underscoring, which you did so eloquently. I think I also really appreciated the emphasis on how Guyana is so multifaceted. It's a country that's in the continent of South America, but it has this very Caribbean identity, as you mentioned, and plays the leadership role in CARICOM, for example. It borders the Amazon, and as you mentioned, is playing a key role in forest protection, but it also borders Venezuela, which has introduced some challenges in the past, including border disputes. You mentioned the IMF statement, which was really quite something, I thought, highlighting the tremendous resources, the role as an energy powerhouse, fastest growing economy, the ability to diversify in the context of the resource curse that we hear so much about, kind of going down a different path. And we all know that Guyana is going to have even a more global role when it assumes its seat on the UN Security Council in January of 2024. So I hope that we have an opportunity to connect these dots in our conversation. And my goal as the moderator is that everyone leaves here today with a deeper understanding of Guyana and its growing role. So I'm just going to limit myself. I have 5 pages of questions, but I promise I won't ask them all. But I am going to start, use the moderator's privilege to ask about something that Assistant Secretary Nichols mentioned up front. And it's one area in which Guyana is showing, really tremendous leadership, and that's regional food security. Within CARICOM, Guyana leads on agricultural diversification and food security. Guyana co-chairs the US-Caribbean Joint Committee on Food Security. So I was hoping you could tell us a bit about why this is so critical for the region, what are the greatest challenges, and what Guyana is doing to address food insecurity in the Caribbean.
Thank you very much. Brian, if we have to answer that question, we'll spend today, right? But let me say that food security is the single most important issue for us in the region. Why? Now, we are faced with a very complex task when we speak about food security, because we cannot speak about food security without speaking about climate vulnerability. Because whatever we produce is susceptible to the climate vulnerability of the region. That is why what we do has to be backed by high level of technology, innovation, research, and development. And that is exactly what is driving the food agenda. But more importantly, we also live in a region where crop insurance and insurance for agriculture is a very, very difficult thing to achieve. And we know that farmers put everything they have in the production of food, and then one event, they lose everything. So we are trying to, not we are trying, we have agreed that as a region, we have to address this collectively. One, we have to increase our budgetary expenditure on agriculture and food production. We have to expand our partnership, and this is why the US and Guyana is playing such, and CARICOM is playing such a massive role working together. The US has announced some specific help and resources to help in the 2 areas of climate change and food security. We're working now on a program to roll out that help and those resources so that we can see the results in the country. We are already seeing the results. During COVID, we saw tremendous increases in the cost of food. And that brought the issue to the fore with a level of attention that this issue required. So not only did it drive up inflation, but it caused a lot of social tension and difficulties for governments, because shortage of food, 1, high prices of food, 2, can destabilize countries very easily. So that is how this issue got the attention that it required, and is now one of the main pillars that CARICOM is looking at. And we set ourselves a target of reducing our import by 25% by 2025. Now, we have identified some low-hanging fruits. So one of the sectors is poultry. Now, you cannot have a chicken if you don't have an egg, right? All the egg is imported out of the region. Then, when you have the egg and you have the chicken, you cannot have the meat if the chicken don't grow. And we need the grains to make the feed. So we found ourselves in the next problem. 1, after the war in Ukraine, we did not have the supply of grain, access of grain, and the prices of grains went up tremendously. If you look at what the industry would have faced in the last 3 years, grain prices if you look at rice, went up by more than 100%, corn and soya by almost 70%. That is the type of increases the industry had to absorb. So in Guyana, we said, listen, let's solve this problem. So we brought a consortium of farmers together, poultry owners, who are competitors, by the way. And we said, your single most important issue here is to have the holistic chain completed right here. We brought them together, we supported them, and from importing all the grains we require, the corn and soya for feed production. 3 years ago, by 2025, we'll be self-sufficient in corn and soya, and by 2026, 2027, we will be in a position to fulfill the requirement of the entire region. So that is the type of bold step and investment we are making. In aquaculture, the US has an enormous market for aquaculture products, prawns especially. We have abundant fresh water. And now we are working on a program to expand our aquaculture production using cage farming technology and other technology to target this market, and also work with CARICOM in expanding their own production to help their hotel industries and so on. And we are seeing that being done in all the region. We will be in a position, and we are working with the best in the game here. The India, Israel, in Qatar. A very important example is Qatar. When the sanctions were brought against Qatar, they woke up one morning without milk on their shelves, without cheese on their shelves, without yogurt. And in 1 year, they built a dairy industry that supply 100% of all their dairy needs. 1 year. And today, not only are they supplying all their needs, they are one of the major exporter of dairy products in that region as a result of the sanction when it came against them, because they had to invest and make that investment. Also, they have built a agricultural sector that is serving the entire region. They've positioned themselves in becoming a food hub. So that is where we want to position Guyana. How to become a regional food hub, processing capacity and capability, and then have Barbados linked to what we are doing with a massive food terminal, because they have the shipping logistics so that we can supply the region and then reverse engineer the supply chain from north to south to north. So that is how we are approaching this issue. Of course, we have challenges. We have limited resources for research and development. We have limited infrastructure. We are now building out infrastructure. We have a lot of issues still with trade barriers. We have to fix some issues in ensuring that we have the best phytosanitary facilities in the region to support the investments that we are making. So that is where we are on that. Thank you.
Thank you. So in lieu of asking another question, because I think you answered what my next question was about, what can the rest of the hemisphere learn from your diversification strategy? But was that Brian? Did you have a question? Oh, okay, office supplies. No, just the importance of diversifying the economy, and you just mentioned just being an agricultural food hub is going to, is one piece of this. You mentioned we have the Minister of Tourism here, the ecotourism and the sports tourism. So I am not going to belabor that point, and I'm going to open it up right away to questions. Yes, right here. In Culata.
I'm Gene Coletta. I'm the editor of the Latin America Advisor publications here at the Dialogue. And I wanted to ask you about yesterday's auction of oil blocks. Of course, of the 14 blocks that were on auction, Guyana received only 6 bids, notably none from Indian companies. And I'm curious to know what you think was that resulted from, what the reason was for that low number of bids, and if to what extent that's a disappointment.
Well, first of all, it's not a disappointment at all. For a matter of fact, in this market, and let us be very, very open and factual about this. We went out on auction at a time when major economies in the world are basically saying to oil producers, we're not going to finance you. They're saying, so you're going to a market where capital is an issue. Raising of capital is an issue. Many countries went to the same market and got no response to their auction. We went to this market with 14 blocks and we got response for 8 blocks. We are very happy. We got response for 8 of the 14 blocks we went out for. And that is significant. That is not that cannot be minimized in any way, shape, or form, because there are many countries that went out and got no attraction. Now, you would have, if you follow a lot of what we are doing, you would know that there are many countries that have expressed a preference for government-to-government exploration and relationship on this issue. India would have expressed a willingness to work from government to government. Qatar had expressed an interest in working government to government. The DR and a number of countries has also expressed that interest. So that option is also there. But what we said is that, first of all, we must put all the blocks out there and have a public process, open, transparent, public process. And that is what we are proud of, that we have been able, as a newcomer in this business, to demonstrate great transparency and openness in putting out the blocks for public auction. And what we have seen is a number of major companies. If you look at those who, the consortiums, a number of the major companies who have the wherewithal are part of the auction. So I would say, you asked how disappointed I am. I'm not disappointed. I think that this is a tremendous accomplishment, given the circumstances, the market, and the realities that we're operating in. Don't forget that we have the experience of having one loan vetoed already, because it was deemed to be associated with the oil sector. If we ask questions, and questions will be asked at COP28, 53% of the energy mix still come from petroleum. If you look at the number of the size of the global population that still does not have access to energy, and the growth, the middle class growth in India and China, where is that energy going to come from? Who's going to supply that energy? And I already demonstrated to you the funding gap on basic SDGs by 2030 that we don't have the resources for. Who is financing this energy transition? So we have to be real and realistic at COP28. And you will hear what we have to say at COP28 as we navigate this complex issue to find the global balance that is needed. Thank you.
I see 2 questions on this side of the room. So the gentleman in the red shirt, and I'm going to take 2 at a time. And Daniela Stevens.
Thank you, Rebecca. Welcome, President Ali, to the dialogue again. I'm Daniela Stevens, Director of the Energy Transition and Climate Program here at the dialogue. And continuing with the issue, the topic of energy, Guyana is rising as a top oil exporter, but it also has an ambitious goal of generating 100% of its electricity from renewable sources by 2025. What can you tell us about these 2 seemingly disparate tracks? What can you tell us about the diversification strategy in energy? What can the rest of the continent and countries that have discovered oil wealth learn from this diversification and renewable generation? And how are you engaging important partners like the private sector, like civil society, to make this a truly inclusive and sustainable approach and a truly sustainable outcome? Thank you again.
And back there.
Hi, good morning. Alejandro Sanchez. I'm a defense analyst for defense news company Janes in the UK. Mr. President, I was wondering if you can talk more about your vision to modernize the Guyana Defense Force, given the obvious tensions with Venezuela, problems with piracy, and in protecting your country's natural resources. For example, the US shipyard Metal Shark is building a patrol vessel, which I believe is going to arrive in Guyana in the next couple of months. You have talked about wanting to buy a mothership type vessel. You have talked about wanting to buy HAL Dornier aircraft from India to modernize the Guyana Defense Force. So what is your vision, again, for the GDF, and what assets do you believe should be bought for the GDF to accomplish its missions? Thank you.
Let me take the first question. Now, to understand, first of all, the 2025 100% renewable, that was unrealistic. That was a target by the last government. I went to COP and said, I'm not going to tell you something we cannot do. And I reset the target to a very realistic target. And it is on the trajectory of achieving 100% renewable, and also to be an exporter of renewable energy. Why can we do this? Very important to know. We have a forest the size of England and Scotland combined. Even with ramping up on our FPSOs, if you net off, we'll still be net zero. We have massive hydroelectric potential, and we are pursuing that, hydroelectricity. We're pursuing natural gas, power from energy from natural gas. That project is already on stream. Then we have the hydroelectricity project. Then we have many solar mini-grid projects, especially for the hinterland and Amerindian communities. So when you combine all of this, and you will see that we have a clear, decisive, results-oriented, measurable approach to achieving the renewable energy targets that we have set ourselves. But not only for Guyana, but also to look at positioning Guyana to be a major part of the energy matrix for the region, especially Guyana Shield, starting from Suriname, coming all the way down to Brazil, and then going on. Now, it is important to note that we believe, like many others, that gas will play a massive role in the transition. We therefore have to build out our gas infrastructure to take into consideration the potential of our neighbor, Suriname. When you combine the gas resources the gas potential that we have, we can become a very important player in the gas matrix and the energy matrix with utilization of gas within the region. So it is a combination of all of these factors that will allow us to achieve the target. So we don't see duplicity when we speak about developing our oil resources and at the same time continuing with our climate agenda, because we have before oil, we were already pursuing a low carbon development strategy. After oil, what we did not abandon that strategy. We have now expanded it. We have expanded it as a low carbon development strategy 2030 that now includes the marine economy as part of that strategy. It includes, it expands itself on biodiversity and the ecosystem. So not only are we going to keep that forest for Guyana, we're going to keep that forest as our contribution to the world and the fight against climate change. We too have difficulties. We are below sea level, our coastline, where 80% of our assets reside. We have to protect that. And we can tell you how difficult it is to find resources to protect that. So we understand the challenge of climate adaptation and mitigation. But these are all issues that we have to take as a topic by itself. So now the involvement of the private sector and the civil society is key. So we developed a local content legislation, and that legislation had the full participation of all these stakeholders. Like the auction, it was an open auction. Every piece of information we make public. For example, all revenue that comes from the sale of oil, all revenue has to be declared within a particular time by the Minister of Finance, within 1 month. If he does not declare that, the law provides for him to get 10 years imprisonment. That is the penalty. So at the end of the year, every citizen can add up and see how much revenue we have. Now, on the expenditure side, any resources from the Natural Resource Fund has to go through the budgetary process of the country, which means parliamentary approval. So it has to go to the parliament, be debated in the parliament, get approved in the parliament, go through the normal accounting system, become part of the public sector investment program, very public, and then it's audited by the Auditor General. The management of the fund is also completely arm's length from the government, independently managed. So those are some of the things that we have in place. Now on defense, we have a very elaborate defense strategy. But our defense strategy is not based on going to war, because we want to go to peace. That is why we have always utilized the peaceful ways in resolving any issues. On the issue with the Venezuelan controversy, of course, we are very clear as to where our borders are. But we have allowed this matter to go to the ICJ, and we have continuously encouraged Venezuela to participate fully in the process, and for both parties to respect the outcome of the process. And that is where we stand with this. Now, we have made a strategic decision that we're going to modernize our defense force. But the modernization has 3 components. One is economic in nature. One is defense diplomacy. And the third is asset, our human resource asset, and our hardware. In all 3 of these areas, we are expanding ourselves. We have perhaps one of the broadest collaboration and partnership with the US now than at any time in our history on training, asset acquisition. But we also, at the same time, have expanded our relationship with India. And we have many other stakeholders who are pursuing us in terms of being part of the modernization of our Guyana Defense Force. So in relation to the defense strategy and where we're positioning ourselves, I encourage you to listen to me in a short while, because I'll be addressing this issue specifically at another forum. Thank you.
No, President Ali is also an expert in defense and security. In fact, I think you're heading over to NDU, and you're a graduate of the Center for Hemispheric and Defense Studies. So why don't I know we're running out of time. Do we have time for another? Okay, why don't I take one more question? We have a question here on the aisle, and if we could make it a quick one.
But just to ensure that all the other persons whose hands were up, you can send me your question, and I assure you, I will send back your answer to the center, and they will circulate it.
More in with this one really quickly. So just you mentioned the border dispute with Venezuela. How is that impacting investor sentiment? But
Sure. Mr. President, it's an honor to meet you. My name is Mateo Samper, and I work for Coursera. I have 2 first praise you. I've been to Guyana many times. I've met several members of your cabinet, and I'm really, with your vision for the country, and also with the team that you've put together to achieve that vision. It's really incredible. I've worked with, we're currently working with several of your ministries, including health, which you mentioned in your presentation, by tripling the number of nurses that are now going into the nursing school. My question, of course, around education. You mentioned in your remarks that that you wouldn't be able to play catch up, and in many ways I agree. And I'm wondering if that means leapfrogging, common term used in education. And I wanted to hear you speak about sort of your plans in that regard. Thank you.
Definitely, we'll be leapfrogging. So what we are doing now, we're doing that human resource audit based on the economic requirement, the requirement for the economy in the future. So let me touch on 3 areas. One, we will have about maybe 14 new hotels in the next 3 years. That requires human resource asset. So we are building a state-of-the-art hospitality center. We're building a national skills training center also that will train all the technical people and certify them in all the new areas that we'll need in the country, because it is not only oil and gas. I'm speaking about building out a very robust manufacturing and industrial sector that will require specialized skill set. So we are working on that. I recently announced that any Guyanese with a basic requirement to do nursing, the government would enroll you, pay for your education. Whilst you are doing your attachment, you'll get a stipend. And when you're finished, we'll employ you. Complete package. We have said, outside of that, that every single child, every single young person who wants to become a teacher, and every single person in the teaching profession, we are going to pay completely. We're investing now in the technology to have all our teachers trained in the country. So every single classroom will have trained teachers, and then we'll move from trained to trained graduate teachers. And incrementally, their salary adjustment will be based on these new criteria. So that's another thing that we have offered. When you look at the size of our population, we have now a number of universities on a special scholarship program in which we are giving the educational opportunity to students all across the country. More than 20,000 students on that scholarship program now. And this is new initiative. We're also going to make university education free. We've committed ourselves to making university education free in the country. That's another area. We have also signed on to an arrangement with the UAE, where we are introducing coding at the primary and secondary school level. 150,000 young people would enter that coding program. So these are some of the initiatives. We are also now equipping all the schools with smart classrooms. And I said recently, we cannot live in South America and not speak Spanish. We celebrate the fact that we're the only English-speaking country in South America, but really that's a competitive disadvantage. And I recently announced that we are going to make Spanish compulsory as a second language in the country. So these are some of the things that we are doing. But more importantly, when I speak about leapfrogging, what do I mean? We're also going to the higher tier. So we are setting up a council for science and innovation. And we want to invest in research and development We want Guyana to become a major hub for research and development in pharmaceuticals, in new technology, in robotics, in AI. So when I said we're taking a deep dive, we're taking a deep dive. So we are now building out that infrastructure. And this is part of what a modern, competitive, resilient, sustainable economy will be like. Now, people ask me about AI, and I said, ask the politicians 10 years from now. They have to deal with a serious issue on AI. And you cannot be functional in a competitive way in a world 2030 and beyond if you don't address these issues now. Time is not on our side. So that is the approach that we're taking. Your question was on.
Let's end on that note to be mindful of your time, but it was actually a tremendous
But
story that you just told.
all the other questions, please send them through the center, and I assure you I'll provide answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us.